The last time we saw IShowSpeed, he decided to sign with Georgia after finishing off a great freshman season with Cincinnati, and I think it's safe to say that Speed would fit right in with the Bulldogs. Because he would turn out to be a dog off and on the field, eventually proving that he was the best player in the country by not only winning the Heisman Trophy, but he would also lead his team to the national championship, where against Ohio State, he absolutely balled out and helped his team win a title, bringing the Georgia Bulldogs to the top of the college football world. But Speed was not quite done yet, because in his final season of college football, he led them right back, where in a game against Tennessee, Speed was going absolutely crazy. And soon Tennessee realized that there was no way that they could stop him, as he led Georgia to back-to-back national titles, and officially established himself as one of, if not the greatest Georgia Bulldog of all time, as he went on to break multiple Georgia records including rushing touchdowns and receptions. But after a career where IShowSpeed had dominated from start to finish, it was clear that it was time for him to move on to the next level. So eventually he decided to forego his senior season and enter his name into the NFL draft. And now that Speed is ready to take his athletic ability to the professional level, he is out here in Indy ready to take care of this NFL Combine where it's pretty clear that he's still got that dog in him. Because he came out here and pretty much dominated the speed and quickness drills. He even did a good job in the broad jump where he jumped further than anybody at his position. So he did have a pretty good draft combine. But now he had to go ahead and deal with his pre-draft interviews where he thought that he was going to do pretty well. But it turns out that Speed did trash, earning himself a 1 out of 10. And now it seems like he might end up as a mid-first round pick. It turns out that Speed didn't know the answer to any of these questions. So eventually he got overwhelmed and started barking at the reporters. Yeah, it was a whole big thing in the media afterwards, and a lot of people felt like Speed was about to fall in the NFL draft. But when it came time for draft day, Speed was not waiting in the green room too long before the Arizona Cardinals would call him, letting him know that they wanted him out there in Arizona, and that with the 13th overall pick, they would be selecting him in the NFL draft. And honestly, man, Speed was out there wanting to do a backflip out there, but he just didn't want to mess up his suit. He was so happy though that he was finally becoming a professional athlete, and it would actually be his 3rd straight team where he gets to wear the color red. But after signing with the Arizona Cardinals, it actually becomes the first time where he gets to wear the number 7. Finally, he's able to wear the same jersey number as his favorite athlete of all time. But as excited as Speed was to finally make it to the league, he knew that it was time to get back to work. And he's out there letting the coaches know that he's going to do everything he can to help turn this team around. And it wasn't too long after where he was finally getting to the preseason, where in his NFL debut, IShowSpeed would be matched up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, it only took a couple carries for Speed to show that he was going to be a dangerous weapon for this offense. The coaches only left him in there for a couple plays, but honestly, that was good enough. By the end of the first quarter, they were ready to take him out, and the Cardinals would go on to win this game 14-0. As Speed now got a little bit of preseason action, and he was feeling good going into the regular season. But the thing is that now that Speed is a professional athlete and has all this clout and attention around him, he got a lot of his teammates out there trying to be his best friend. They out here trying to come on stream and go to Indonesia and all this other stuff. But it's crazy because they ain't the only one that he has to deal with.
We not about our shit, all right?
Oh, we do this. You can buy this.
We not about no.
Us friends.
Regardless though, Speed was honored to be playing for this team. And eventually he was ready to finally get his career started, where in his first NFL game, the Cardinals would be on the road to match up against the Buffalo Bills. Now early on it became very clear to Speed that the NFL level was just very different from college. The Cardinals offense was struggling so much throughout the first half that Speed had negative rushing yards after 5 carries. So eventually they decided to deploy him more as a receiver, where he did come up with some pretty good plays. But by the end of this, with it still being 7-0, this Cardinals offense just could not get it together, as Kyler Murray throws a pick that results in the Cardinals losing their first game of the season. Now, it was obviously not a great way to start Speed's career, but he felt good about how he played. At the end of the day, though, he was one of the people who had to answer for the loss, but he did not make any excuses, man. He was ready to use this loss as motivation. And the following week, he was working real hard to build up his skill as he was heading into his 2nd game of his career, where in this one, he would be playing his first home game against a division rival, the Los Angeles Rams. Unfortunately, in this one, it was pretty clear that this offense had not started clicking yet. And it wouldn't be until the 4th quarter on a pass to Speed where he came up with not only his first touchdown of his career, but this would actually be the first touchdown of the Cardinals season. So IShowSpeed knew that he had to try and do a backflip.
Darren!
Unfortunately though, this game would result in another loss, as the Rams end up taking this one 17-10. And despite the fact that Speed had another decent game for a rookie at least, it was safe to say that the vibes in the locker room were not very good, as it was clear that no one was a fan of this team starting off 0-2. And although Kyler Murray had changed his number just so we can be number neighbors with Speed, Speed was not happy with the way that things were going right now with the team. And it didn't really change too much going into a game against Detroit, where although once again Speed would be the guy who came up with a big play, coming up with a catch for a touchdown to bring this game within 3 points. By the end of it, with Arizona now down by 2 possessions, another interception from Kyler Murray would go on to put an end to this game, as the Cardinals are now starting their season off 0-3, and so far they've put up a total of 17 points, 14 of them being from IShowSpeed. But after multiple weeks of this offense being one of the worst in the league, Kyler Murray and Speed were trying to find ways to turn this team around. So Speed realized that maybe he has to spend more time in the gym, and he actually started to bulk up a little bit.
W or L bulk. W or L. I've been bulking, chat. W or L. L?
Either way though, Speed was locked in, man, and he was ready to get into his next game, where he might have a chance to help his team win their first game of the year. Early on, this Cardinals offense was not doing too well, as someone on defense actually decided to say Shabaka to Speed and put an end to their opening drive. In the second quarter though, with this game tied at 3, Speed started to say, excuse me, they really started putting the moves on people, bro. He had people in a blender. And it felt like the Cardinals might have a lot of momentum going forward in this game. But literally on the next play, Kyler Murray throws a pick, and this one would be taking the distance all the way to the end zone for a touchdown, now putting the Commanders up by a possession before on the very next drive, Kyler Murray would find Speed wide open on the right side of the field, where there was nobody in front of him to stop him from going across the goal line for a touchdown, putting up a score that would tie this game up for the Cardinals. And now it feels like they might have a chance to really do something. And that feeling would grow even more as they got the ball back in the fourth quarter tied at 10. But with IShowSpeed on fire, he was able to get the team in field goal range. And despite the fact that they would eventually get stopped on third down, they had already done enough to secure their first win of the season, coming up with a victory against the weak-ass Washington Commanders. And IShowSpeed had an excellent day, going for over 150 yards total on offense and scoring a touchdown. But even after finally getting their first win, Speed was not complacent. He knew he had a long season ahead of him, so he kept his head down and stayed working hard. He just hoped that the Cardinals will be able to keep things rolling in their next game on the road against the San Francisco 49ers, where once again it seems like the Cardinals are back to being as bad as they were in the first 3 weeks. Because by the end of this game, they actually had a chance to go down and win it. But Kyler Murray throws a pick, which wasn't necessarily on him because Speed did call for the ball, but it would eventually result in another loss on the season. And unfortunately, the losing would not stop there, as another bad game against the Green Bay Packers results in a 7-10 loss. And with the Cardinals now tied with the very bottom of the league, IShowSpeed knew that he had to put in some work crafting his skills going into the following game, where against the Chargers, Speed actually came out here and played pretty well. He had one of his best days on the ground in this one, but the Cardinals would still go on to lose, going down to the Chargers by 1 point. And despite the fact that Speed looked happy after the game, he had actually reached his lowest point. I mean, he had never lost so much in his career since he was playing the other kind of football. But he and his coach agreed that it was finally time to turn things around. They had to do something, and Speed knew that his offense just was not doing enough. So he did the only thing that he can think of and hit up the greatest player of all time, as he met up with Tom Brady and asked him some tips on how to get back on track. And so you can tell by Speed's face that he's excited to get back on the field. But first he knows that he has to upgrade his skills a little bit more, and then also he talked to the coaches. He told them that the new jerseys they got are weak as hell and they gotta go back to the old ones. And it turns out the coaches agreed. So it seems like the Cardinals were finally on the same page going into their next game against the Dolphins. Now early on in this game against Miami, the Cardinals were looking different. They handed the ball off to Speed to the left side where he said, excuse me, just absolutely breaking these two dudes' ankles. And I don't know where he was off to the races towards the end zone for a touchdown, putting up a score on his first carry of the day. And the Miami Dolphins felt like they might be in for a long day. Now at this point in the season, Speed was one of the leading running backs in receiving yards. But in this game, he was really showing off how good he was as a running back, as he was having his best day on the ground so far. But it also wasn't just him, because Marvin Harrison Jr. would actually start showing up big for the first time all season, bringing the team down to the goal line where on the next play, Speed comes up with his second touchdown of the game, giving the Cardinals one of the only leads that they've had all season. Well, right before Miami would tie it back up. But the way this Arizona offense was moving today, it did not surprise anybody that Speed got wide open downfield And once again, he was on his way downfield for what could be a touchdown before he does some spin move, and yeah, I don't know why he did that.
Stupid.
But it was all good because a couple plays later, he crossed over the goal line for a touchdown that not only gave Arizona the lead, but did enough to give them their second win on the season. The Cardinals will go on to win this one 21-14. And IShowSpeed had his best day of his NFL career so far, with over 150 yards rushing and 87 yards receiving with 3 touchdowns. The reporters were looking forward to talking to him after the game, but not as much as his teammates were looking forward to celebrating. They had truly felt like they had turned over a new leaf on the season, but the only way to find out would be by seeing what happened in their next game against the Chicago Bears, where once again Speed was making his impact felt as a receiver by saying hey, and picking up big first downs after the catch. And I don't know if y'all hear that, but Speed's out there talking crazy to opposing players. The Cardinals would eventually get down to the goal line where Speed would hop right over for a touchdown, putting up a score that gives his team the lead and a ton of momentum going forward. Because by the end of this one, the Bears still had no points, and Speed was getting across the goal line for another touchdown that had done enough to put an end to this game, as the Cardinals would take down the Bears 14-8, led by an even better performance on the ground than Speed had the previous week, putting up 175 yards in a game that brings the Cardinals from the bottom of the NFL all the way towards the middle of the NFC. But just because the Cardinals had won a couple games in a row does not mean Speed can get complacent, especially when he's still not even a top 5 rusher in the league. So going forward, he knows that he's going to have to put a lot more work on the ground. And that all starts as the Cardinals head into their next game against the New York Jets. Now in this game, it took all the way to the end of the first half for the Cards to get down to the goal line and score their first touchdown, tying this game up at 7 before coming back in the third quarter. We're now down by 3. Speed was out there saying hey, and picking up big first downs for the Cardinals. He helped bring them down to the red zone where he found himself wide open down the left side, and he easily got his team across the goal line for a score, now taking the lead in a game that would ultimately come down to the final minute. And with this clock ticking down, the Cardinals knew that they had to make a play. So they swung Speed out to the right side where Kyler Murray would find him wide open, hitting him in stride as he's easily able to cross over the goal line for another score. And just like that, he had helped the Cardinals win their 3rd game in a row, beating the Jets 21-17 in a game where Speed went for over 100 yards on the ground once again. But despite the fact that the Cardinals were on a little bit of a win streak, the grind was not going to stop there. Even during their bye week, they were out there working hard, and Speed was doing a great job leading his team. Speed had grown a lot so far throughout his rookie season, but he felt as locked in as he's ever been going forward throughout the rest of the year. And he felt confident that the Cardinals might be able to keep their win streak alive going into their next game against the Seahawks. And in this game, it seems like his confidence was paying off, because although he was having a rough day on the ground, by the end of this one, he was able to get his team across the goal line to take the lead, eventually pushing this game into overtime, where after the Seahawks failed to score, all Speed had to do was just lead his team into field goal range. And once he had done that, he had helped his team come away with their 4th straight victory, as the Cardinals had beat another divisional rival in a close game, and all of a sudden the national media wanted to talk about Arizona. It was clear that Speed had been the key for their turnaround, but they were still far away from the playoffs. And they knew that if they wanted any chance at postseason life, they would have to find a way to keep their streak alive going into their next game against the Vikings, where early on in this one, IShowSpeed was looking as motivated as ever. This man was out here snatching people's ankles while bringing his team down to the 1-yard line, where a play later, it was actually Kyler Murray who would take this read option and cross over the goal line for a score, giving the lead to the Cardinals in a game that they would maintain all the way till the second half, where IShowSpeed was absolutely balling out and frying his defense like those chicken wraps at Popeyes, coming up with his 2nd touchdown of the day, and officially bringing his team's winning streak to 5 games, as the Cardinals would close this one out 21-14. And at this point, the Cardinals were just simply on a roll. They came out here in a game against the Seahawks led by IShowSpeed, where he got him across the goal line for a touchdown before the end of the first half, finally giving them the lead in this game. But they would get the ball back with 30 seconds left, and Speed, now with his X Factor, was out there looking absolutely unstoppable. This dude was out there bringing his team inside the 5-yard line, where just a play later he got flipped over the goal line for a score, putting up some more points in the game that ultimately led to another victory on the season, winning this one 17-0. And out of nowhere, Arizona is 7-6 on the year, finally putting them above 500 for the first time all season. And it was mostly due to their superstar rookie who was working hard on and off the field. And Speed was really out there taking no days off, bro. One day he even decided to meet up with Deshaun Watson just to see if he can jump over him. See, that's harder than y'all think. Probably not as hard as rushing for over 1,000 yards on a season, which IShowSpeed did not really care about. He already knew that he was going to hit those numbers, just like he knew that he could lead his team to the playoffs, where for the first time all year, it looks like they actually have a chance to make it. But not just that, because they might also have a chance to win their division. IShowSpeed was helping his team pull off one of those Indiana Pacers comebacks, just kind of spread out all throughout the season. But they felt like if they wanted a chance to actually win their division, they're going to have to keep winning as they head into their next game against the New England Patriots. Now, by the end of this one, the Cardinals have found themselves in a position where they finally made it back downfield, and Speed was breaking people's ankles on his way to the end zone for a score, putting up some points that, instead of winning the game, actually resulted in it going to overtime, where after the coin toss, the Patriots end up winning it, which ultimately resulted in New England winning this game, as the Cardinals didn't even get to touch the ball in overtime in a game that they lost 23-17. But at this point, it seemed to be an acceptable loss as the Cardinals were still 7-7 on the year, and led by Speed, who was now the second leading rusher in the league. Well, based on a lot of the team's record from the NFC, it looks like the Cardinals might have a chance to go from out of the playoffs to potentially even getting the #1 seed. In order to do that though, they would definitely have to finish the year out undefeated, all starting in their next game on the road against the Carolina Panthers. And in this game, it was clear to the entire stadium that Speed was not playing around, as early on he went out there and jumped over a dude, broke off a tackle, and he was gone. Speed jumped over this dude like he jumped over that Lamborghini that one time, and just like that, this man was in the end zone, already doing enough to put another W in the team's win column, closing this one out 12-0, and you could just tell that this team felt like they were really about to get back on track. They came out here in a game against the Rams where at one point they were stuck on their own 1-yard line, but it seems like all they have to do is just hand the ball off to Speed, because one carry up the middle and he was gone. This man Speed was on his way to a touchdown, but he was also on his way to leading his team to another win, as they would close this game out 14-0. And out of nowhere, when you look at the playoff picture, it looks like the Cardinals might actually make the playoffs. But sitting at the 6th seed, they have a chance to not only lock their seed in, but they still might have a chance to claim the #1 seed if they can come away with the victory in their last game of the year, where at home they'll be set to face off against the 49ers. Where despite the fact that Speed was not having a great day so far, all that would change with one carry, where out of nowhere he is able to break loose, and just like that he is off to the races, getting his team across the goal line for a touchdown, and it looks like him and Marvin Harrison got a little celebration going on. Probably because they know that they've already done enough to close out the regular season, as the Cardinals will win this game 14-7, and it looks like they did a little more than just win their division, as it turns out that they did get the 1 seed. They went from one of the worst teams in the league halfway through the year. This man IShowSpeed had shocked the league so much by leading this team to the playoffs that they actually decided to make him the cover of Madden 26, becoming the first rookie to ever grace the cover in his following season. And he seemed like the best choice considering that he was the first rookie since 1978 that went on to win the Offensive Player of the Year, last done by running back Earl Campbell. But at this point, man, Speed's fame was growing so large that he was able to just drive around town and get random gifts from his fans.
Open that shit. You'll love it, you're gonna love it, you're gonna love it.
Fuck is
You're
this?
gonna love it, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
Wait, guys.
You're gonna love it. Woo, 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 woo. Come here, motherfucker.
And you know what, man, going into the playoffs, he knew that he could not let down his loving and caring fans. All he had to do was just keep the Cardinals locked in going into their first playoff game against the New Orleans Saints. Now, early on in this one, it actually wasn't Speed making big plays as Marvin Harrison Jr. comes up with a catch. And out of nowhere, he was able to turn it upfield and break away from the entire defense, bringing his team upfield for a touchdown, putting up a score in the first half that seemed to have opened the floodgates for Arizona. Because by the end of the first half, IShowSpeed was out there wide open, and he was out there celebrating his way across the goal line for another score to extend the Cardinals' lead. And by the end of this one, with the Saints still having 0 points, and with Speed going for his second touchdown of the day, the Cardinals had officially earned themselves a ticket to the NFC Championship game, after blowing out the Saints 21-0 in a game where Speed went for over 100 yards on 16 carries. And honestly, the whole year Speed knew that he would be able to get his team to this point. He didn't lose much throughout his football career, and he didn't plan to lose much more after starting the year 1-6. So Speed already had a feeling that no matter who he played in the NFC Championship, yeah, they were getting to the Super Bowl. But when he found out that he was about to play against the Dallas Cowboys, yeah, the Cowboys ain't getting back to a championship anytime soon, bro. The Cardinals win this one 21-13, and this was, of course, in another game where Speed went out there and absolutely balled out. But what was crazy, though, is that this team had literally started this year off trash as hell. And I don't know where they just turned it on and finished the year 9-1, earning themselves the #1 seed in the right to face off against the #1 team in the league, the Kansas City Chiefs. We're in the Super Bowl. IShowSpeed made it clear that he did not come here to lose. This man Speed came out here on his first carry and swerved out the entire defense before gliding downfield for a touchdown. There was nobody who was going to stop him as he crossed over the goal line for a touchdown, and honestly, bro, he couldn't even believe that he was doing this against the best team in the league. Somehow, though, he was finding a way to get it done. This team was only just getting started, because by the end of the first half, he was out there making his presence felt as a pass catcher, and he was still out there snapping people's ankles while picking up a first down. bringing him down to the goal line where he picked up another score, giving his team the lead before going into the second half, where unfortunately on this play, a fumble from his teammate would actually turn this game around, seemingly giving the momentum to the Chiefs as they would eventually go up by a score. And now by the fourth quarter, it looks like the Cardinals might be in trouble, but Speed was trying to change that. He brought them down to the goal line where on this play, he jumped and fought his way over for a touchdown, damn near body surfing his way across for a score that ties this game up. But now we just have to see if the Chiefs are able to put some points up, which eventually they can't, meaning that this season would come down to the final minute of this game. And thanks to the Cardinals' star players, they were able to get their team downfield, starting with Speed on a catch that got them across the 50, bringing them to 3rd down and 6 where Marvin Harrison would come up with the catch, putting the Cardinals in field goal range with no timeouts left. So after this play, they got to immediately rush everybody off the field and bring on their field goal unit. And with 3 seconds left, they just barely get this snap off, and the field goal is good! The Cardinals make the most insane season comeback in NFL history, winning this game 24-21, and most of it is because of their superstar running back IShowSpeed, who at this point has already become the Arizona Cardinals' greatest running back in the history of their franchise. This man IShowSpeed in one season has become a legend, and he will always be remembered for this season after winning an Offensive Rookie of the Year, an Offensive Player of the Year, and a Super Bowl MVP. Now, Speed had played so well this season that there was an abnormal amount of defensive players who retired. Turns out they didn't want to deal with Speed after he put up 1,400 yards on the ground with 15 touchdowns. Not to mention he put up 940 yards as a receiver, all in his rookie year. This dude IShowSpeed was absolutely different, and at this point he felt amazing about going forward throughout the rest of his career and potentially even ending up as the GOAT of football, kinda just like his favorite athlete of all time. But this was the story of IShowSpeed playing football. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to get this one to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.